I stood in the bridal suite, holding the dress I had sewn with my own hands, each stitch a wish, each seam a silent prayer. The room smelled faintly of hairspray and roses. May was radiant, her eyes rimmed with excitement and nerves. She barely looked up when she said it. "Can you not tell anyone you're my mom today?" It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. But it cut all the same. She fiddled with her bracelet as she spoke, not meeting my eyes. "It's just people don't know about my background, about before." I nodded slowly, as if my bones understood before my heart did. "Of course, sweetie, whatever makes your day perfect." She smiled then, briefly, as if I'd passed a test. And I swallowed something bitter that didn't go down. I sat in the back row during the ceremony. No corsage, no mention in the programme. Just friends of the family written where my name should have been. I folded my hands and memorized every moment, clapped when others clapped, never sooner. That was my place now, quiet, out of frame. At the reception, they seated me near the exit and no name card, just an extra chair, a table of distant cousins and co-workers. I ate a cold roll and listened to toasts that skipped me. Her father's name was spoken, a man who'd vanished when she was 2, but not mine. I raised her, but in that room I was nobody. When the photographer called for family photos, I half stood before May's voice cut the air. Maybe just the immediate ones. I didn't move again. Just stepped aside and watched through the camera lens. Later, while I stood outside for some air, the photographer came by, camera slung over his shoulder. "You're her mother, right?" he asked, kind but hesitant. "I saw you crying." I nodded. "Don't delete those photos," I said. "Please." He nodded back. "I wouldn't dream of it." That night, I remembered my own wedding in '78 and my mother front row despite chemo, holding flowers, proud and pale. "Always be proud," she had whispered before I walked down the aisle. She had meant it as legacy. Weeks passed. Then the email arrived with a subject line, "Wedding album." I almost deleted it. But I clicked. And there I was. Not posed. Not centered. But present, reflected in mirrors, blurred in the background, mouth mid-smile, eyes full of something between ache and awe. In one photo, I was caught holding the bouquet alone, unaware. The caption simply read, "Mother of the Bride." That was the one I printed. Had it framed. Hung it in the living room under a small brass plaque that said I was there. Always. Some weeks later, May came by. She saw the photo. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, finally, "You really do look beautiful." I smiled, not with bitterness, just truth. I know. They may have cropped me out, but I was always in the frame. The kitchen smelled like nutmeg and lemon zest. I stood at the counter, rolling thin sheets of lace fondant between my palms, fingers sticky with cornstarch. The wedding cake was going to be 3 tiers of simple but elegant. Ivory with delicate hand-piped lace. I'd offered to bake it when May mentioned the catering budget was tight. "Just a little help," I'd said. "It'll be my gift." She'd agreed, reluctantly, with a kind of tight-lipped gratitude that felt like resignation more than thanks. The house was quiet, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of the old floorboards beneath me. Then the front door opened briskly, like a gust of someone else's pace, and May's voice floated in. "Mom, are you still working on that thing?" That thing. The rolling pin paused in my hand. "In here," I called gently. She stepped into the kitchen in a rush of dry leaves and cool air. Her cheeks were pink from the wind, and her nails glinted freshly done. Behind her came Brianna, May's best friend from college, tall and sleek, with hair like a shampoo commercial and a laugh that sounded practiced. She didn't even take off her shoes before walking in. "Oh wow," Brianna said, eyeing the cake pots drying across the table. "That's really homemade." May laughed a little too loudly. "Yeah, I told Mom to keep it simple." I smiled faintly. "It's not done yet," I said, dabbing a paper towel at one spot. "The lace details take time." Brianna glanced at her phone. "Anyway, we were thinking of swapping the dessert table with that crepe station from the tasting. You remember the one, May, with the bruleed peaches?" May turned to me, hesitant. "Yeah, so we're considering having the venue do the cake instead. It's just easier for storage, delivery, logistics, you know." The fondant in my hand softened. "Oh, I see." I set it down gently. Smoothed my apron. "You've already done so much," she added, eyes darting to the floor. "It's no trouble," I said quietly. "I already bought the vanilla beans." There was a beat of silence, the kind that's heavy, not loud. "We'll see," May offered vaguely, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "We're still finalising." "Of course." They moved on quickly, chatting about dress fittings and playlists as they headed upstairs. Their voices drifted, paired like dancers, up and away. I stood alone, flyer on my hands, the room suddenly larger than it had been. The counter bore the beginnings of a cake no one asked for anymore. I wiped it clean. That evening, I found the receipt for the bakery quality cake boards I'd ordered online. I slid them quietly into the kitchen drawer under the old measuring cups. I didn't throw them out, not yet, just moved them to where they wouldn't be seen. Later, I folded laundry on the couch. A pillowcase slipped from the basket, fluttered to the floor. When May passed by on her way to bed, she said, "Night, Mom," but didn't look at me. "Not really." I nodded and smiled. The kind of smile you give someone when you're learning to be small. Mornings used to mean something. When May was little, she'd stumble into the kitchen half asleep, her blankets still trailing behind her, and sit at the counter while I buttered toast and warmed milk with cinnamon. "You make the mornings feel soft," she once told me, all freckles and honesty. Now, she didn't come down until after the coffee was brewed, the kind she liked, dark roast with a hint of cardamom, ordered in bulk from a subscription box. I didn't drink it. It made my stomach ache. I still made it anyway. One morning, I'd sliced fresh strawberries and arranged them neatly on a little dish, just like I used to. May brushed past it. She grabbed her travel mug, kissed her fiancé's cheek, and said, "Oh, there's some yogurt cups in the fridge if you want something." No mention of the fruit. No glance at the plate. Later, I watched her spoon prepackaged yogurt into a bowl and sprinkled chia seeds on top of something she'd seen in a bridal magazine, I imagine. I cleared the strawberries quietly. She didn't notice. The planning binder sat open on the kitchen table for weeks. I didn't touch it unless asked, though my fingers itched every time I passed. One day, while she was at work, I flipped through a few pages just to see. Venue checklist, floor vendor confirmations, playlist drafts, all organised in neat tabs. There was a section labelled family roles. It was blank. Not just mine. There were roles assigned to her fiancé's parents, mother-son dance, corsage colour, seating placement. But my name was missing. It wasn't there to begin with. That kind of absence hums differently than rejection. It doesn't sting like a slap. It sinks in, low and slow, like just collecting on something precious you forgot to cover. Dinners grew quieter too. We used to eat together always. Even during high school, even when she was mad at me for not letting her wear eyeliner in 8th grade, she'd sit at the table, arms crossed, but present. Now, she and Colin would eat in the den, plates balanced on knees, their show playing softly. I still cooked. Not always, sometimes they ordered in, bowls of take-out noodles I'd later scrape into the trash. But on nights I made dinner, I'd set the table. 3 plates. 3 napkins. Only mine was used. Once she passed behind me as I set out silverware. "Oh, Mom, you don't have to do that. We're probably just going to eat in the den." Probably. She didn't say it unkindly. She never said anything unkind. That's what made it harder. The living room mantel still had our old family photos. I dusted them weekly. Not because they needed it, but because I needed it. There was one of May at her 8th grade graduation in a blue dress I sewed from a remnant bin. She was beaming, teeth too big for her smile, arms wrapped around me. One morning, I noticed the frame was gone. I found it in the guest room drawer. When I asked gently, she shrugged. "We're just going for a more minimalist look." Minimalist. A style where love is too loud and mother's too visible. Sometimes I'd offer suggestions, careful ones. Maybe baby's breath in the bookcase that photographs well. Or a hymn her grandmother loved during the ceremony. Small thoughts, gentle like feathers. "Well," she'd say, "I think we already finalised that." It wasn't refusal. It was that soft redirect people use when they don't want to include you, but also don't want to look unkind. At night, I'd sit at the kitchen table and write lists. Things I'd done. Things I still hoped for. A napkin note, hem sleeves on Colin's shirt, remember vanilla extract, don't forget to smile. As if that needed writing down. In bed, I'd lie awake and trace the ceiling cracks with my eyes, remembering the way May used to crawl into my bed after a nightmare and whisper, "I feel better just being near you." Now she lived near me. but not with me. Not really. The week before the wedding, a box arrived at the door. She opened it with excitement at the bridesmaids' robes. She held one up, pale pink silk with her initials embroidered in gold. "Look at this," she beamed. "Aren't they stunning?" I nodded. "They are beautiful." Then I asked softly, "Did you order one for me too?" She blinked, lips parting like she was surprised by the question. "Oh, no, Mom, I didn't think. I mean, you're not really in the bridal party, right?" I smiled tight but convincing. "No, of course not." And that was the moment I understood. I was still invited, but I was no longer included. The wedding was now just days away. The house was filled with ribbons and garment bags and emails flying across screens. I moved through it like a ghost, folding linens, refilling sugar jars, sweeping confetti from a trial-run centerpiece project no one asked me to help with. And then, one afternoon, I found the box. It was an attic behind old holiday decor and baby blankets that smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. I hadn't been looking for it, not really. Just searching for a spool of ivory thread that I thought might match the groomsmen's pocket squares. But there it was. A shoebox fraying at the corners, labelled May's birthday, age 9. I sat on the floor and opened it. Inside were photos, drawings, a handmade card folded in quarters, and a little blue ribbon she'd once worn in a spelling bee. The card was scrawled in loopy handwriting, every other letter uneven, they ended in Mom shaped like mountains. To the best Mom in the world. Thank you for my party and my cake and my pink dress and for making the balloons stay up even when it rained. You are my favourite person. Love. May. I pressed the card to my chest. The room spun just slightly, and not from dizziness, but from the ache of remembering too clearly. That birthday. I could still feel the icing under my nails, still hear the sound of the rain tapping the windows as we moved the whole party indoors in under 20 minutes. May had cried out first, afraid her friends wouldn't come. But they did. I'd made her dress that year pale pink tulle over a satin lining. It was simple, with little rosettes on the bodice. She twirled in it 3 times before breakfast. "You made this?" she had asked, eyes wide. "Of course I did," I said. "Nothing store-bought for my girl." She ran to her friends that day and shouted, "My mum made my dress," as if it were the most wonderful magic. That same dress now lay in a memory chest, yellowing around the edges. I closed the box gently. It felt heavier somehow, though it was just paper and ribbon and time. Later that evening, I stood at the sink washing dishes from a dinner no one ate together. I kept thinking about the pink dress. How proud she had been. How loudly she'd said my mum. Now she didn't say it at all. The title hadn't changed. But the meaning had. Back then, I was the one she called first. When she got her license and cried because she couldn't parallel park, it was me who drove back with her 2 hours to help her practice in an empty church lot. When she failed her first college exam and thought it meant she wasn't smart enough, I was the one who stayed on the phone until midnight, reminding her of a 5th grade science fair, of her essays that made teachers cry. When she got engaged, she called me from the parking lot, still shaking with the news. I was still the first name her heart whispered. Until one day I wasn't. There was no ceremony for that. No announcement. No new rule written in. Just a slow fade, like colours draining from old fabric. And somehow that made it worse. That night I left the box in the bed. Not to guilt her. Not even to start a conversation. Just in case she remembered too. The next morning the box was gone. Back to the attic, probably. No word. No mention. Just silence, soft as dust. The invitation arrived late. I hadn't expected one, and not really. After all, I lived in the same house. I'd been there for every fabric sample, every whispered call to the caterer, every crumpled draft of the seating chart. But then, on a Tuesday morning, a small cream envelope appeared on the hallway table. My name, Mrs. Helen Merritt, written in May's handwriting. Delicate, careful. I turned it over in my hands like it might dissolve. It wasn't heavy. Just cardstock and ink. But my heart pounded like it was made of stone. I sat down at the kitchen table before opening it. My tea had gone cold. The room was quiet. Inside, a simple card, white roses, silver trim. Elegant. May Evelyn Merritt and Colin James Holland. The rest blurred for a moment. I blinked hard. Maybe this was it. A small shift. A gentle acknowledgement. An apology written in paper and script. I read it again. Slowly. And then I saw it. My name was not listed as mother of the bride. There was no mention of my relation at all. Just an address. Time. A dress code. The kind of invitation you send to a distant cousin. A neighbour. A polite obligation. I placed it gently on the table. Pressed my palms flat against the wood. Still, I told myself maybe this was just how things are done now. Modern. Minimalist. I smoothed the crease in the envelope. She'd written my name. That had to count for something. That afternoon, May came home with a small shopping bag. She handed it to me in the hallway. "I got you a wrap," she said. "For the ceremony, it might get chilly near the lake." I opened the bag carefully. It was light grey. Polyester. Mass-produced. The tag still attached. A marked down sticker beneath it. "It'll go with your dress, I think," she added, not looking at me. I nodded. "It's thoughtful, thank you." That evening, I hung it beside my own hand-pressed shawl, the one I had crocheted in soft ivory wool, the colour of her baby blanket from years ago. She used to sleep curled against it, one hand fisted near her chin. The new wrap had no weight to it. No story. Just fabric. But still, maybe she meant it. Maybe it was her way of trying. I left both hanging undecided. On Thursday, 2 days before the wedding, the florist called the house. "Hi, this is June from Petal and Thorn, just confirming the family corsages." I paused, pen hovering over the grocery list. "Yes, this is Helen Merritt. I think I'm one of them." The voice on the other end checked her records. "I have corsages for the mother of the groom, stepmother of the groom, and the bride's godmother. That's all listed." "Oh," I said, swallowing gently. "That's probably right. Should I add one for you?" I paused. "No," I said softly. "If it's not on the list, it wasn't meant to be." That night, I took the wrap from the hanger and folded it slowly. I laid it across the back of the chair by the door. Then I went upstairs, opened my closet, and pulled out my old shawl, the one with the hand-stitched scalloped edge, slightly frayed now but still lovely. I held it to my chest for a long while, then placed it back in the drawer. Maybe they'd think it too sentimental. Too much. Too mother. I wore the grey one instead. On the morning of the rehearsal dinner, I waited on the porch for May. We planned to drive together. When her car pulled up, I smiled hopeful. She opened the door halfway and said, "Actually, would you mind taking your own car? Colin's parents are riding with us and it's just easier." I nodded. "Of course it is." That's what I said. Of course it is. I stood on the porch for a few more seconds after she drove off, my hand still clutching the little purse I bought just for this weekend. Navy blue with a silver clasp. It matched the dress she hadn't complimented. That night back home, I stood in the bathroom and wiped off my lipstick. I looked in the mirror, truly looked, and asked myself a question I hadn't spoken aloud in years. When did I become extra? Not excluded. Not quite. Just extra. Like a fourth chair at a table set for 3. And yet, even after all that, I laid out my dress for the next day. Pressed it carefully. Polished my shoes. Packed tissues in my clutch. Because some part of me, foolish or faithful, still believed. Tomorrow, maybe she'll look for me in the crowd. Maybe, just maybe, she'll call me what I've always been. Mom. The night before the wedding, the house was full of light and laughter. Not mine. Upstairs, Mate and her friends clinked champagne glasses, tried on matching silk robes, giggled over face masks and playlist debates. I could hear them through the ceiling, little bursts of joy, private jokes I no longer recognized. I stayed in the den. Folded the last of the clean napkins. Adjusted the hem of Colin's shirt one last time, though it didn't need it. The steam from the iron curled faintly, rising into the quiet like a ghost. Then I turned it off. Sat down in the old armchair near the window, and just exhaled. That kind of exhale you don't notice you've been holding for months. Maybe longer. I looked around the room. Nothing in it really belonged to me anymore. The walls were still my paint. Yes, a pale rose May once called Grandma pretty. The curtains were mine too. Soon in the early spring when she first moved back in to save for the wedding. Just for a year or so, she'd said. Until things settle. But nothing had settled. Only shifted. And somewhere along the way I'd become the coat rack. A quiet provider of extra space, extra money, extra calm. Not mother. Not quite. Just structure. A place for her joy to land. A soft floor. The hallway outside was lined with boxes from the registry. Things she hadn't opened yet. Things she might never use, expensive pans, wine glasses, a mixer I knew she wouldn't touch more than twice a year. Still, I'd sent the blender. Just to have my name on the list. I got up to make tea, though I wasn't thirsty. Habit. That's what so much had become the soft, reliable patterns of a woman who didn't want to be a burden. A woman who stepped aside before being asked to move. Who gave up seats, gave up opinions, gave up expectations. My back ached. Not from age, but from the weight of everything I hadn't said. Not once had May asked if I was tired. Not once had she looked at me, really looked, since this whole celebration began. But she loved me. I still believed that. Didn't I? I sat at the table with my teacup cooling in my hands and stared at the refrigerator. Covered in magnetized postcards, bridal store coupons, engagement photos with dates I now knew by heart. Not a single picture of us. Not one. I tried to remember the last time she'd called me Mum in a way that wasn't rushed, distracted, or transactional. Maybe Christmas. No, even then, she'd been texting through dinner. Her fork pushing cranberry sauce around like it was an inconvenience. I'd made the whole meal. Roasted the turkey the old way she used to bake for when she was 10. Stuffing with cranberries. Mashed potatoes with extra cream. She'd barely touched it. Trying to eat lighter, she'd said, eyes on her phone. I'd eaten alone that night too, even with people in the room. That was the feeling now. A house full of people. And me separate. Slightly off stage. Part of the history. Not the present. Certainly not the future. I went to bed early, though sleep didn't come. Instead, I lay still under the old quilt my mother stitched for me when May was born. It was then now. Worn through in places. But I hadn't replaced it. It had weight. A memory. It reminded me of a time when being Mum meant something tangible, when it came with finger paintings and secret handshakes and whispers in the dark after nightmares. Don't let go, she'd say, her hand tucked into mine. And I never did. Not once. Even when she let go first. Around midnight I got up. Headed down the hall. Asked the guest room, the storage closet, the hallway mirror. I stopped there. Looked at my reflection. My eyes looked smaller than I remembered. Shoulders rounded. Skin soft with time. I didn't look sad. Just quiet. That was the scariest part. Not the grief. The stillness. The deep, echoing sense that I had slipped through the cracks of my own life. Like wallpaper behind new paint. Still here. Just not seen. In the kitchen, I turned the teacup from earlier over in the sink. One of the last cups from my wedding set. Cracked now. I didn't bother drying it. I just stood at the window and watched the streetlight flicker over the sidewalk. No cars. No wind. Just the hum of a refrigerator and the weight of things unsaid. That was my wedding eve. No speech to give. No corsage. No place at the front. Just me. Still. Present. And somehow forgotten. The morning of the wedding came soft and golden. I woke early. Not because of nerves, I'd stopped expecting much from the day, but out of habit. Years of being the first up, the one who laid out dresses, packed lunches, warmed the house with quiet motion. But today I moved slower. Deliberate. Not because I was tired, but because I wanted to feel every moment. Even the ones that weren't meant for me. I brewed tea, the kind I liked and not the herbal blends May favoured, with names like his citrus and morning blossom. Just black tea. Strong. With milk. I sat in the kitchen and drank it from a chip mug, the one with the faded sunflower she painted in second grade. It had survived dozens of cupboard purges. I kept it even when it looked too worn. Too old. Too me. And while I sipped, I heard the house awaken. Laughter. Heels on hardwood. Zippers. Hairdryers. The music of women preparing for something radiant. But none of it was for me. I wasn't part of the procession. Not listed on the programme. No roll, no corsage, no seat marked with my name. And yet I was there. Present. Invisible, perhaps. But not absent. That distinction mattered suddenly in a way it hadn't before. May floated past the kitchen briefly in a robe the colour of late spring. Her cheeks were flush, her eyes bright. She didn't see me at first. Then paused. "Oh, you're up early." "I always am," I said gently. She nodded, distracted. "We're leaving for the venue in an hour. Did you need a ride?" "No, I'll take my own car." She hesitated, like she might say something more. Then her phone buzzed, and the moment passed. "Okay, well, see you there." She disappeared again, trailing perfume and purpose. I finished my tea. Then I stood. Slowly. And for the first time in months, I didn't rush to fix, to fold, to fill the empty spaces. I just stood in my own quiet. And felt it. All of it. Upstairs, I dressed carefully. The navy gown simple, clean lines. The one I'd chosen months ago because it made me feel steady. Not young. Not flashy. Just true. I pinned my hair back. Brushed on a little powder. No perfume. Then I reached for something I hadn't planned to wear. My mother's locket. Gold, small, slightly dented. She'd worn it at my wedding in 1978. Said it was for strength. For memory. Inside was a photo of May as a baby, red-faced, eyes squinted, her fist wrapped around my pinky. I fastened it at my neck and looked in the mirror. For a moment I didn't see the woman everyone overlooked. I saw someone solid. Someone who had loved thoroughly. Who had held every night terror, cooked every recovery meal, stood at every school concert, then whispered, "You've got this." I didn't have a role in the wedding. But I had a role in May's life no one else could claim. I was the beginning. The realization didn't thunder. It didn't spark. It settled. Warm. Quiet. Steady. I wasn't going to fight for recognition anymore. But I wasn't going to shrink either. Today I would attend the wedding not as the forgotten, but as a foundation. I didn't need to be called the mother of the bride to know I was. The truth doesn't need permission to exist. It just is. I left the house with a small clutch, my spine straight. Not hoping. Not aching. Just ready. Not to be seen, but to see everything with the dignity of someone who remembers who they are even when others forget. That was the shift. Not action yet, but the knowing that something must and would change. Starting with me, I arrived at the venue early. Not as early as the bridal party. They'd been there since sunrise for makeup and mimosa rituals, but early enough to find a seat before the crowd trickled in, before the chaos blurred the lines between invited and invisible. The ceremony was set by the lake. White chairs, satin ribbons fluttering in the breeze, a small arch wrapped in pinas and trailing eucalyptus. It was beautiful. Tasteful. Just like me, I parked far from the main entrance, and not out of shame, but because I didn't want to ask anyone to move. My shoes crunched softly on the gravel as I walked alone, the navy dress catching the morning light just enough to remind me I was here. Present. I could have gone straight to my seat in the back row. That's what I'd planned. But I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked toward the edge of the grounds where the gardens sloped into a quiet path behind the venue. No guests. No photographers. Just the soft rustle of leaves and birds. I found a bench tucked beneath an old willow. Sat down slowly, and from my purse I pulled out a small envelope, cream-coloured, addressed in my own handwriting. I'd written the letter the night before. Not to May, not to anyone else, to myself. I unfolded it with care, as if it belonged to someone worth reading about. It said, "Dear Helen, today is not about being honoured. It's not about the corsage you didn't receive, or the speech that won't mention your name. It's about standing quietly in the place you built. It's about the strength of showing up with grace, even when you've been erased. You are not background. You are the beginning. Your love was never loud, but it was constant. You gave her roots. And today, even if she forgets, you remember. And that is enough. Walk tall. Watch with open eyes. And take space, not because they allow it, but because it's yours. I read it once, then again. And when I folded it back into its envelope, I didn't tuck it away. I placed it on the bench beside me. Let the wind touch it. Let the morning sun bleach its corners. It didn't need to be kept. It had already done its work. From the bench, I saw the first shuttle of guests pull in. Laughter, heels clacking on pavement, arms linked. A small part of me flinched a reflex I couldn't quite shake. But I didn't stand up. I didn't adjust my dress. I just sat a while longer, until I was ready, until the letters truth had settled not just in my chest but in my spine. And then I walked back. Past the trellis, past the sign that listed important family, past the ushers who didn't know my name. I smiled at them anyway. Chose a seat in the third row. Not the back. Not front and centre. But close enough to see. Because I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't asking for a role. I had already lived it. And there, with my hands folded and my heart still, I waited. Not to be noticed, but to witness. To sit in the sun with my locket warm against my skin and think, you don't need to be introduced to know you belong. The ceremony moved like a dream I wasn't quite part of. Vows exchanged under a sky too blue to hold sadness. Music swelled. Colin looked proud. May looked radiant. Guests out their eyes. Chairs creaked softly as people leaned forward to take pictures. I sat in the third row, hands in my lap. I watched it all. The way one watches a movie filmed in a house they once lived in. The words mother of the bride were never spoken. But I didn't need them to be. After the ceremony, while guests filtered toward the reception hall for champagne and speeches, I stayed behind. The aisle was empty now. Just petals crushed under shoes, forgotten programs folded on chairs. And there where May had stood just minutes before lay her bouquet, set gently on the ground, probably while she hugged her new in-laws. No one noticed it. I looked at it for a long moment. Then, without fanfare, I walked forward. I bent down and picked it up slowly, deliberately, as if it were mine to carry. And then I turned away from the reception hall, walked down the side path that led toward the water. No one stopped me. No one even saw me go. There, by the lake's edge, where the willow trees curved gently overhead, I stood alone with the bouquet in my hands. It smelled like freesia in memory. The ribbon was still warm from her grip. I sat on the low stone bench and looked out over the water. I didn't cry. There was no need. I simply breathed in once deeply and let it go. I placed the bouquet beside me, not laid down like an offering, but upright. I'm good. Then I pulled something from my clutch. A photograph. It was recent. It wasn't staged. It was us in May at 6, front teeth missing, arms wrapped tight around my neck as I knelt in the backyard garden, both of us laughing at nothing. I tucked it into the bouquet's ribbon, tied it gently, then stood, walked back toward the venue, but not inside. Instead, I placed the bouquet on the small welcome table by the door, the one covered in baby photos, love quotes, and framed signs that read our story begins here. I set the bouquet down, the photo facing outward. Then I turned and left. No announcement. No scene. Just a final gesture. A quiet incision of truth where no one had asked for it. A reminder I was here. Not just today, but always. Back home, I changed out of the navy dress. Hung it carefully. I boiled water for tea, black with milk. Then I took the framed photo from the hallway, the one May had once removed for minimalism, and hung it back above the mantel. I dusted the frame, straightened it, then added a new one beside it. The photo from today. A still from the ceremony. I wasn't in the centre. Wasn't even posing. But there, in the edge of the frame, reflected faintly in the mirrored face behind the arch, was my silhouette. Watching. Hasn't. Poof. I sat back, looked at the wall, and whispered to no one. He didn't see me, but I was always in the frame. It was late afternoon when May came by. 3 days after the wedding. She let herself in with the key I never asked her to return, her steps uncertain on the hallway floor, not rush, not casual, just hesitant. I was in the living room, folding a small quilt I'd mended earlier that week. Not for her, not for anyone. Just for the comfort of doing something that made me feel useful. She stepped into the doorway and paused. There was no ceremony in her entrance. No grand apology. Just a long silence between us. And then her eyes drifted upward, to the wall, where the photo now hung the one taken from the wedding. A candid shot, blurry around the edges, soft with late daylight. In the background, reflected in a mirrored face, was my silhouette. Faint, but unmistakable. May stared at it for a long time. Then she walked forward. Her hand touched the frame. "You look beautiful," she said, voice quiet. I smiled gently, easily. I know. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't pride. It was fact. Simple. Undeniable. And for once she didn't look away. She just stood there absorbing it. Maybe remembering what it had cost me to smile like that. Maybe realizing what it meant to stand with dignity even after being erased. She looked around the room like she hadn't in a long time, like it was unfamiliar in a way that made her see me differently. There were no lectures. No accusations. Just a clearing in a house where silence had long settled like dust. "I'm sorry," she said finally. Not dramatic. Not detailed. But real. And I accepted it not with words, but with a slow nod. Then I poured her a cup of tea. Black. With milk. Just how she used to like it. She held the cup and sat with me for a while, neither of us filling the space with apologies we couldn't name. And that was enough. After she left, I stood by the window and watched the light shift across the yard. A quiet breeze moved through the trees. My shawl, hanging near the door, fluttered slightly in the draught. Everything was still, but nothing was stagnant. The house didn't feel empty. It felt clear, like I could breathe again. Like the years I had given, the quiet I had held, the space I had offered all meant something, even if the world didn't clap for it. Even if it took a photograph, accidentally framed, to prove it. That evening I made a small change. I replaced the bouquet centerpiece on the dining table with a single framed photo. The same one from the wall, but this time I placed it face up at the table like a guest. A quiet witness to everything I had held, everything I had endured, everything I had been. Because I didn't need a title on a program. I didn't need a microphone or a cortege. I had shown up. I had loved. I had stayed. And that always would be enough.